The Trump administration is really trying to set the table for some type of either direct or sponsored military action in Venezuela. You heard the other day what, hopefully you listened on last Thursday. Michael gave sort of the broad outlines of what's happening in Venezuela. And I've actually been reading just a little bit of some legal thinkers stuff about people who were supportive of the use of that constitutional amendment in Venezuela, but feel that Guaido, I can't pronounce it, Guaido went a step too far. It's one thing to use that constitutional amendment as a way of saying we need to start a process to find a new president. It's another to simply say like, oh, and I found one. It's me. And it also feels like the U.S. is a little bit rusty at this. Doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like...
I want to be really clear that the U.S. Has definitely been, the 2009 coup in Honduras was backed by the U.S., what we've done in lawfare in Brazil. So we've been all over this. But this specific version of like 1980s, like kind of like, let's have the military depose somebody and set up death squads. It does seem like they're a little bit rusty.
Well, they tried it in Venezuela in 2002, right, with Hugo Chavez, but they failed.
Yeah, but it was a half-hearted thing.
The pattern in Venezuela that also is similar to now, though 2002 there was way more grassroots support for Chavez, but it's just that the opposition hypes the Republican administration, Bush, now Trump, and it's like we got this.
It just seems like they're showing their cards. The administration is just showing their cards in a way that we haven't seen.
I think the reason they're doing this now, though, is they're trying to intimidate the military into defecting. I think they're really trying to say, like, look, guys, this isn't just like we're going to back a couple of oligarchs and you can still keep your patronage networks with a new government, which is obviously the case. This is like
put up a picture of him with his all right, so here's one of the ways
arrogant. It's a miscalculation because again, I think you're right though. The Venezuelan military, whatever else you say about it, I think there is a healthy, normal human response of like, you don't get to dictate who my government is by threatening me, asshole.
And it's also, I think, one that has a certain sophistication as to like, how supported this administration is. So Bolton gets up there with a piece of paper that has one thing written on it, and has somebody done a zero in? It supposedly says like what, 5,000 troops to Colombia. This is like written like 5,000 U.S. troops to Colombia. Now look, they're there. The idea that he is that's the way that they plan their wars is just one line on a yellow piece of paper. That's clearly a means of which to. I don't think this is for domestic consumption. I think it's for consumption from within in Venezuela. This idea that like we could be providing material military support for some type of invasion. And look, it's possible he didn't realize what he was doing, but I can tell you that I did this with Charlie Kirker on the debate. I went out there after seeing Jake talk to him about his, I went out there and I wrote like I can't remember what it was, but the 503C filings, and wrote that on the outside of my notebook and kept flashing it at him during the debate. I mean, this is not sophisticated psyops here, folks. And I imagine, the Venezuelan military probably has a little bit more sophistication than I do when it comes to what's actually going on. That I don't think
you're both trained by the same people.
That's right. That's right. So here is John Bolton on with Trish Reagan, and I'll tell you something. I'll make this announcement right now. if this new catchphrase of this administration catches on, I may have to go away in some fashion. I'm not sure exactly how, if it'll involve medication or what, or just like
Go to your happy place.
put myself in a rocket and
I'm
just
going to go to
into
a Caribbean islands
But if-
that
but
won't
if-
be deposed by the United States for like another 10 years.
But if I see anybody on the mainstream media say the words troika of tyranny in any other way other than quoting what Bolton says, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
We want everybody to know we're looking at all this very seriously. We don't want any American businesses or investors caught by surprise. They can see what President Trump did yesterday. We're following through on it.
So if you think of a company like Citgo, which is owned by PDVSA, which is the state-run oil company there in Venezuela, we have a lot of those Citgo assets right here in the U.S. Is that something, for example, sir, that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. You know, Venezuela is one of the three countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
Well, now, aside from the troika of tyranny, and of course, troika of tyranny in its original translation means they have our oil under their ground. Yes. And kudos,
I'll use that phrase. The
kudos.
United States, Colombia, and Brazil are forming a troika of tyranny that are trying to foment a disastrous coup. And there already
But
is.
you got to appreciate the fact that Bolton's out there being very explicit.
Yeah,
right?
That does feel new to me.
not new from
correct me
Bolton.
if I'm
It's not
wrong,
new
but
from
they
Bolton.
didn't used to just go
Bol-
on the news
that's the
and
thing.
say it out
Bolton-
loud that we're doing
Bolton-
this for oil money.
Bolton said publicly, and granted it was before he was UN ambassador, but I mean, he said like you could blow off how many stories the UN building, it
the
would make
top
no
20
difference.
Yeah. No,
No, Bolton has been
He's an
publicly
edgelord.
threatening people. Yeah, Bolton's an edgelord. Bolton's been publicly threatening people for ages.
And so this could be their, setting up the American public for this, but I also think it could be they don't feel like they need to set up the American public for this. I think they also feel like they can just do it.
You don't need to set people up for bringing them together.
It's
As
so
you would say, we'll all come together in a grand coup.
It's so Trumpy. Like, remember when Trump was like, yeah, it's bad what they did to Jamal Khashoggi, but like we have a lot of economic interest with Saudi Arabia, so I don't know.
One guy's life, a lot of oil. It's not even close. The sort of the positive news, and we're seeing this maybe in the context of Yemen. Ro Khanna has reintroduced a war powers resolution, or is about to end our involvement in the Yemen civil war. And here he is on Democracy Now! I think it was yesterday or the day before, talking about, just broadly speaking, the failures of U.S. intervention and regime change.
And criticizing that. I mean, for all of our legitimate concerns about Russian interference in our elections, where we get concerned if a journalist appears on Russian television and a member of Congress talks to them, imagine if someone were calling the opposition in our country. We would be furious, justifiably furious. And so it makes no sense that our vice president would be calling and interfering in politics in Venezuela. What we ought to be doing is working through international institutions and laws, calling for human rights, but not getting involved in a potential civil war. And again, this is no defense of Maduro. Everyone recognizes that there have been extrajudicial killings there, that his economic policies have led to hyperinflation. But the reality is that when we have intervened in places like Syria, in places like Libya, what has the consequence has been that things have gotten worse. And for some reason, the people who have led all these interventions are still able to dictate American foreign policy. It's almost as if failure is the qualification to be part of dictating what we should be doing in Venezuela.
And that's, in addition to him being absolutely right about the repeated failures of our intervention, even ones that, if there have been any, that were done with the best of intentions, our record of success is extremely low. Did pretty good in World War II to a certain extent, obviously. But when we get into, when we're talking about non-World War situations, things have not worked out so well, particularly when we're talking about intra-country conflicts. And so, but he also, I think, does a good job there of explaining, like, this is how you can be critical of a leader, and there are mechanisms in which we have to hopefully impact and push other leaders to be better or to be gone in some fashions, or to strengthen the ability of people to have some form of self-determination. But it has to stop when it becomes some form of intervention.
Well, and again, I mean, the alternative to this coup and this right-wing force that people like countries like Mexico are putting forward is diplomacy. And also, I have to say, I mean, I'll get to this more tomorrow, potentially, but Bernie Sanders, like a lot of people were annoyed about his tweets because, he opposed the intervention, but still was quite critical of Maduro. And I had some annoyance with that too. But speaking, I know someone who's in contact with people in the foreign ministry of the Bolivarian government, and they were like, those tweets were great. Like, they're not expecting Bernie Sanders to come out and go like, and Nicolas Maduro should get a medal. Like, the people who are still sincere inside that government, which I think there's definitely a lot of people that are, and that a government has achieved some amazing things and obviously also had failings, they're not blind to the problems and things that need to be changed either. In fact, as usually the case, they're the ones that are the most sincere about making those changes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if a President Bernie really wanted to undo the damage back to zero that the U.S. has done to that country and other countries in Latin America, they'd be paying reparations for all of the sanctions that they've imposed on these governments in order to make them fail.
And or the death squads that they've unleashed.
Yeah, they could unkill some of the people there too. Why not?